Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Steve again, Harmless Rebel. Gonna do a punk rock video. So, brother Billy Hurst, about I don't know, a month and a half ago, was doing an online auction, one of his Monday night auctions, and he had a bunch of first and second pressing OG punk grails for sale, and he really hooked me up with a good price. On the stuff that I bid for. He already had them for a good price, and he kind of hooked me up as a bundle as well. And I don't want to say that got me listening to a bunch of punk. I've been listening to a lot of, I did a video a couple months ago where I started listening to a lot of the early punk from the mid to late 70s and early 80s, and that's part of what's in here. And then I'm always listening to a little bit of hardcore here and there. It's always mixed into my regular listening. I've always been a fan, at least since the late 80s, of hardcore. And here's some of the stuff I've been listening to. A few of these are recent pickups. A few of them are not, just stuff I pulled out from the collection. This one, I might have shown this one before. Actually, these next two, I'm not 100% sure, but I just listened to them again. The first one, so I've been running across promo Clash pressings a lot lately. I now only need Combat Rock, a promo copy of Combat Rock, and I've got promo copies of all of them. But this is one of them. This is Black Market Clash. Is this a U.S.? I can't remember if this is a U.S. or not. Yeah, this is a U.S. pressing. I did at one time have a promo U.K. pressing as well. But when I got rid of my Clash, I went through this thing maybe 10 years ago, where I wasn't feeling the Clash at all, and I sold all my Clash stuff. So as I've been finding really nice copies, and luckily they've all been promo copies, oddly enough, I've been buying them and replacing them, and I got this one for a really good deal. I think I paid like $15 for that. Pretty much in mint condition. Next up, this was a really cool one. This has been on my want list for years. So they did a couple versions of this. So this is an original pressing of Smoke 'Em If You Got Him from Reverend Horton Heat. He actually played here a few nights ago, and I wasn't able to go. He's one of my favorites. I love seeing him live. I've talked about him a bunch of times. I think the first time I saw him live was in the mid-'90s, and whenever he's around, it comes through, I try to see him. So they did two versions of this. This was Sub Pop in, was this 90? Yeah, 1990. So they did a 10-inch EP version of this, and then they did a 12-inch version. I'm not sure what the thought behind it was. I've always wanted an original pressing of either, though, and one of my local record stores had one of them. This one is one of the colored vinyl variants from, you didn't get this stuff like this wasn't real common in 1990. So that's very cool. But really happy to finally have this. Hopefully, next time I do catch him, I'll be able to get this one signed. Jim Heath and Jimbo are both really good about signing stuff. So, really looking forward to that. Was Jimbo on here? Yeah. So very cool. Was just spinning that. And the difference is I think there's 2 extra songs. This has 8 songs. I think there's 2 additional on the 12-inch versus the 10-inch. And then one more 10-inch. This is the Dickies. This was a promo EP that they did. When was this? Maybe 1980? Does it even say 78? 78. Okay, so 1978. This is their cover of Paranoid, though, which I've always loved. And then their songs Hideous and You Drive Me Ape, You Big Gorilla. Definitely worth picking up. It's not super expensive. You can get this one for $8 to $10, and it's just fun. And I love Black Sabbath covers, especially from other genres. Next, finally, glad to finally have this one on vinyl. This has always been a favorite soundtrack of mine. I had it on tape for years. Just some of the classics on here. You've got Black Flag, The Germs, Catholic Disciple, X. This was kind of my introduction to X. when this came out. Circle Jerks, Alice Bag, and Fear. And I mean, it's got two of my favorite Fear songs. I love Living in the City and I Don't Care About You. Just if you haven't seen Decline of Western Civilization, go out and see it. It's a fantastic. I mean, it's one of the best music documentaries. Was it? What was her name? Yeah, Penelope Spheris. It just killed it on this one. The other two weren't near as good, but this one it really caught light. It was lightning in a bottle. Just fantastic. Highly recommend grabbing a copy of that if you see it. Next up, so I did a video. Speaking of getting into the late '70s punk. I also was getting into a lot of the early post-punk stuff that I hadn't really explored in the past. And I ended up getting the second, third, and fourth Gang of Fear albums. And I mentioned I didn't want to buy the first one because I knew I would eventually run across a copy of it. And I ran across a super clean copy of it a couple months ago. Been playing this quite a bit. I don't know if this is my favorite Gang of Four or the second album. I love both of them. But finally got a really clean copy of Entertainment from Gang of Four. A really nice original pressing. Glad to finally have that one in the collection. I was getting so sick of buying reissues because I couldn't find an album, and then literally within a week or two of buying the reissue, finding an original copy, you know. And there's an example of that later on in this video. Next up, this is not my favorite, but it was one I was missing, so I bought the Record Store Day reissue. It sounds good, but with the Record Store Day prices, for $20 more, I could have had an original pressing of this, and it's not even one of my favorites. But this is Bucky Fellini from the Dead Milkmen. The first three Dead Milkmen are my favorites. I still like this one. When was this? This was a little bit later. Does it even say? This was 87. So there's still a few really good songs on here, but it just doesn't capture what I loved about those first few albums. Yeah, I guess I'll just leave. I'm glad to have it. It'll be nice to pull out from time to time when I get in that Dead Milkmen mood, but that'll be the only time I listen to it, you know. So this one was kind of a blind buy. I don't know what made me buy it. So I loved Operation Ivy. The Operation Ivy, the Energy album and the EP, or was it Energy that EP or was it the album? I was getting them backwards. But the EP and the album, the record that's got those two together, is one of my all-time favorite punk albums. It'd be in my top 15 or 20 records of all time. I absolutely love it. When the band fell apart and Rancid was created, I loved the first few Rancid albums. That kind of ends with Out Come the Wolves. That was the last one I really liked. Each album after that I really wasn't a fan of. And I haven't gone back, and you know, I bought those albums when they came when they came out back in the 90s, and those few after and Out Come the Wolves just never did it for me. It wasn't hitting the spot that those earlier albums hit, and it may just be that and Out Come the Wolves was so good that it was hard to. You couldn't compare it to that, you know, and that kind of hurt the rest of their albums. But this new one came out. My local record store had it for like $12. I was like, you know what the hell? I love Rancid. And honestly, I really dig this album. I played it a few times. I'm really surprised how much I liked it. I mean, there's definitely some nostalgia to it, but I mean, it's really good Ransom tracks. I mean, it sounds like Rancid. There's a couple great tracks on here, like all their earlier albums had. They had some really killer tracks, and then the rest of it was still just really good. It doesn't sound like a bunch of 50-year-old guys just trying to make money or keep their lifestyle going by just dropping an album. It's well written. There's still a bit of that. I don't want to say that desperation of their early albums, but there's still a little bit of drive in here that I wasn't expecting to get, especially this late in their career. But really dug this. If you're a Rancid fan and you haven't liked their last, 2 decades of material, maybe check this one out. I really dug it. I'm going to give this a couple more spins before I throw it up on the shelves. Just really enjoyed it. Next up, I'm not generally a best of fan. There's very few best of albums I have. This is a band that I've liked most of their releases through, I don't know, through the mid to late 90s. From the early 80s to the mid to late 90s, I like pretty much everything they released. But this is one best of or compilation that I really enjoy. I always had a copy of this in my cars. There was always a copy of the CD, and I just ran across a really clean pressing of it. But this is All Ages from Bad Religion. Just a really good career retrospective going all the way back to, I think they go all the way back to the second album. So they go back to the early 80s. But I mean, all of their big hits are here. It doesn't sound like some greatest hits where it's not mixed well and you can tell they come from different albums. It's really well mixed, really well put together. And, if you're just in the mood to hear those hits, this is the way to do it for relatively cheap, Save this. There is a grail. There's actually a couple grails in here, but I'm going to save that one for last. So speaking of albums that I just bought I just talked about how happy I was that a reissue was done, because original pressings are impossible to find and the prices have gotten crazy, and they hadn't done a reissue since the 90s, and the reissues were getting expensive. So I finally bought a reissue of it, and within 2 months I find not a first pressing but a second US pressing of Earth AD from the Misfits. I'm so happy to have an early pressing of this. It's just such a fantastic album. This is not my favorite Misfits album. This is probably my third, but still, just an all-time classic. Just really good rock and roll. And I mean, some of their biggest hits are on here too. I mean, you got Devil Log, you got Green Hell, Wolf's Blood. I mean, just so fantastic. So really this is one that Billy really hooked me up with. Really, really happy to have that one. Next up, this was really cool. So this got released, I believe, on CD a number of years ago. And when they announced for Record Store Day that they were going to release it, I went back and forth with whether I was going to get it. I've talked about the Ramones. The first few Ramones albums I love. The rest are, if somebody's playing them, I'm cool with it. I won't turn them off. I still like the Ramones. But those first 3 Ramones albums are where it's at for me. And I didn't know if I wanted to hear their demos. But not only did I really enjoy this, the version of 53rd and 3rd that's on here, may be one of my new Ramones favorites. It's a different take on it. It's just fantastic. This thing, it sounds really good. It wasn't super expensive. I think it was like $25. If you run across a copy of this and you're a Ramones fan, it really is a must-have for the collection. Really like this one. A little bit of nostalgia. So my first trip to the Persian Gulf. My first trip. Yeah. My first deployment to the Persian Gulf was in 97, I believe. Yep, the year this came out. And I'm sorry, my first cruise to the Persian Gulf was 98. And I was real big into CDs. I've always been a music guy. I would order stuff off of CD Now. This is before Amazon. Amazon eventually bought CD Now and merged with it, and that created the music branch of Amazon. But in '98, we had very limited internet on the ships. I was in the Navy at the time, and you had to have a hookup. Like we didn't have, like the normal sailor didn't have access. Neither did the regular officer, didn't have access to the internet. The only people that did were the Intel guys and the computer guys. And I had a buddy who was an IT, and he would get us access at like 1, 2 in the morning when nobody was there. And we would go in and just look at what CDs were available, order CDs. And I was getting about 6 CDs every 2 weeks or so in the mail while I was in the Middle East. And then every time we pulled into a port, they had CD stores. So like by the end of the cruise, I would have a huge section of my rack, which is basically a big coffin that opens up. All your stuff's inside, and then you sleep on top of it. Anyway, the ship also got CDs in on the little ship store. And we're not talking a lot of CDs. They would have like 30 CDs to choose from. So one of the CDs that I grabbed, I had never heard of this band. It just kind of looked like punk rock to me. So I bought it, and I really liked it. I still love this album. I don't like anything else that they released after this. Actually, on the next cruise, I bought their next album, which was the album they blew up with. And as soon as I listened to it, I ended up selling it to a friend because I thought it was terrible. But this is Dude Ranch from Blink-182. From the first time I heard this, I loved it. I told a bunch of buddies that were into punk about it. They all bought it. They all loved it. We went back and bought Cheshire Cat and Buddha, which were the 2 albums before that. Liked both of those. What was the big song on here? Was it Damn It? And there was one more. There were 2 songs on here that were pretty big hits for him, though. By far the best thing that Blink-182 ever released. After this, the next year was my next cruise to, or my next deployment to the Middle East on a different carrier. And same thing happened. They got a copy of Enema of the State. I was like, oh, I love Blink-182. I grabbed that and I listened to it. I didn't get it. I still don't like it. It's just super poppy in a way that I didn't like, and, they just went downhill from there. But this is kind of the pinnacle of Blink-182, in my opinion, and really the only album that I still listen to. Cheshire Cat and Buddha. If I ran across them for cheap, I would grab them, but this is the only one that I feel like I need to have in the collection. So next up, a couple more just classic. A couple of these I would say are definitely grail level albums. Again, these next few are all ones that I got from Billy. This one was a first U.S. pressing. Super happy to have this. The cover is a little beat up, but the vinyl sounds fantastic. But it's first U.S. pressing of Legacy of Brutality from the Misfits. I don't know if you can see. I mean, the corners are kind of beat up, It looks like it was well used, but the vinyl itself sounds really, really good. So really happy to have that one. And then we get into the Black Flag. Instant Black Flag collection. I had later pressings of most of these. I've talked about this album. Is this my favorite? This is probably my favorite Black Flag album. My War. If you haven't checked this one out, really killer. A lot of people don't like this one. There's definitely some Black Flag influence, especially on the B side of this album, which is really why I love it. But Black Flag went all over the place. Damaged is like the perfect punk album, and with each album after that, they got weirder and weirder. Started bringing in Black Sabbath, started bringing in jazz fusion. And the fans hated it, and I feel like they kind of loved that the fans hated it. It was kind of an fu to everybody in true punk attitude. But My War, man, Damage maybe. They're right there. They're both fantastic though. Next up, Who's Got the 10.5? The live album. When was this one? 85. So this one came out in 86. I had never owned a copy of this one before. Super clean copy of that one. Also Loose Nut. Like I said, you kind of got a little bit of the fusion going on this one. Now, this one is one that people definitely hated. So the A side is basically spoken word. The B side is an instrumental, and I think the only full track on here, it was at Armageddon Man, is the only one where it's lyrics to music. Another one that people really hated, but I hated at the time when I first heard it in like 89 or 90, and it came out in 84, but I hated it when I didn't get it when I first got it. And it's kind of grown on me, and I listen to this one pretty regularly now. Also, Jealous Again. All of these are first pressings that I've just shown. The Loose Nut, the Live, the My War, Family Man, and then Jealous Again. These are all super clean first pressings. So really happy to have all of those. And then we've got, this was a record store day from maybe 2015. If you're a New York Dolls or Heartbreakers fan, this is a must-have. This is so good. I'm talking the record store day edition. So Volume 1 was released in 79 or 80. Or I don't think it was Volume 1. I think it was just live at Max's Kansas City. But this is Volume 1 and Volume 2. Apparently, in 78, they recorded Volume 1. And it did so well. So the band had already broken up by that point. They got back together to do a show at Max's in 78, and it was released in 79. It did really well. So in 79, they got back together, did another series of shows that would become Volume 2. Well, apparently, they only made it through the first 5 or 6 songs before Johnny decided to get high as shit. And I guess the rest of it's pretty bad. But these first 5 or 6, or I guess it's the first 6 songs that they did for Volume 2 are some of the best versions of these songs and the best that this band has ever sounded. The Live at Max's Volume 1 is just one of those classic live albums. It sounded better than LAMF. LAMF is known for having horrible mastering. But Volume 2... the version of All By Myself is the best I've ever heard it played. You've got Let Go, I Love You, Can't Keep My Eyes on You, I Want to Be Loved, Do You Love Me, Don't Mess with Cupid, and then So Alone. So Alone was off of Johnny's solo album, but it was done by the Heartbreakers on here, and it's the best it's ever sounded. If you're, like I said, if you're a New York Dolls, a Johnny Thunder, a Heartbreakers fan, this one's a must-have, and you get it for like $25, but it needs to be the Volume 1 and Volume 2 record store day pressing, and they did a really good job on it. There's a little bit of intergroove distortion on side 1 when you get to the final track on side 1, One Track Mind, but other than that, it sounds fantastic, and it's worth it just for that Volume 2. It's so good. There's some really good notes too, and they kind of mention at the end of the notes, whoever wrote them said that not only was this the end of the Heartbreakers, this was the end of Max's Kansas City too. So this was recorded, Volume 2 was recorded in like November or December, I can't remember, of was it 1979? And then like 7 months later in 1980, Max's shut down for good. I think they tried to reopen it in the 90s, and it only lasted for a couple months before it was shut down. So, but must have. Great album. Next up, a little bit of power pop goth. I had never seen this before. I was flipping through the bins at one of my favorite record stores, and I ran across this. It's The Cure, Happily Ever After. And I had never seen this before. So what this is it's a 2 LPs. The first LP is the full 17 seconds. And the second LP is the Full Faith album. So in 1980, or I guess this was 1981 when this was released, but those came out in 80 and 81, and they were never released on vinyl in the U.S. they were only released on cassette. And I have the cassette of Faith. Faith is my favorite Cure album. I love most of the Cure's albums, but Faith has always been the one that really spoke to me, and 17 Seconds is right there with it. What I like about these albums is these two albums are where they kind of became the Cure. You still hear a little bit of that post-punk from the late 70s, but you're starting to hear what would become the Cure in the 80s, the Cure that we all got to know and love here in the U.S. You really hear the transition here, the drums and the bass. You still get a little bit of that post-punk beat, but again, you're starting to hear the band that we would love. So in '81, this was released in the U.S., and this is actually a promo copy. The center labels are a little bit different too compared to the other pressings. But since neither of these albums were released on vinyl in 80 or 81, in late 81 they released this, which is both of them together. And I found it for $30, which is insane, because these go for 90 up to like $150, and really good. And this thing is in pretty much mint condition, other than a little. There's some like water staining right there. But I mean, I looked online. These don't pop up for that price. So, and then last but not least, a grail and a half. I have been looking for a copy of this for at least 15 years. I've run across a couple copies over the years that are just beat up, and people still wanted crazy money for them. Not only did I get this for a great deal, I don't think that they realized the pressing that it was, and I don't think that they realized how valuable it was. I got it for about half the going rate. This generally goes a little over $100, but this is Eye for an Eye from Corrosion to Conformity. This is their Corrosion to Conformity is kind of a funny band. So they kind of started off as a hardcore band. Then they moved into thrash. And they kind of moved into crossover, then thrash, and then they became kind of the southern sludgy doomy band that we've come to know and love. They've been a favorite of mine since I first heard them in the early 90s. I think Technocracy was the first album of theirs that I got, and I was hooked instantly. I've never owned a copy of this until now. But not only did I find a copy of this, so there were two pressings in '84 when this came out. There was the one with the famous COC logo on the cover. They pressed about 2,000 of those. And then they pressed, they don't know how much, but I've read anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 copies of this. So this is the second pressing from '84. With this album cover, it comes with an insert, and then it comes with the sticker of this little dude right here, and it's complete. And this thing is, if not for this right here, and I was so pissed off. So the guy I bought it from put a sticker on it right there, put the price tag right there, and if not for this little thing right there, this thing would basically be mint. It looked unplayed. The vinyl was flawless. It sounds fantastic. There's not a mark on here other than now this little spot from the price tag. It drives me nuts when people take these valuable albums and put a price tag on them. I don't know why you couldn't just put a sleeve and then put the sticker on the sleeve. It drives me nuts how many record stores do that. But so happy to finally have this in the collection after decades of looking for it. People don't realize, too, that they think because Pepper Keenan's come and gone that the band has changed a lot over the years, and they really hadn't until recently. But Woody Weatherman, the guitar player, Mike Dean, the bass player, and the vocalist when Pepper's not there, and Reed Mullen, they were the core of the band from 1984 until just a couple years ago. I think it was 2020 when Reed Mullen died. I believe it was it cancer that he had? I'm sorry, it may have been alcohol. It may have been cirrhosis. But Reed died in like 2020 or 2021. He's on all of their albums, though. Even their most recent album, No Cross, No Crown, was recorded before he died. And then just a couple years before that, Eric Ike, who was the original singer on this first album, just died in I think the late '90s, and maybe it was him that died of cancer. But you still got the two main guys, Woody and Mike D. When I saw them last year with Pepper, I've actually got it signed. It's signed by Pepper, Woody, and Mike. But anyway, super happy to finally have this in the collection. I don't know that I would recommend this unless you're a diehard COC fan, or if you're into just gritty gutter punk or gritty street punk, then maybe you would dig this. But I really like it. Unless you're into that raw kind of hardcore, it's probably not going to be for you. But it's fantastic, and for a COC collector, it's just kind of a must-have. So that's it, guys. I hope everybody's doing good. Take care, guys, and I'll see you soon. Later, VC.